via telephone, Joseph Joey Torts Ferretti. But before we get to that, John Bodwell, we had a debate about odoriferous versus odoriferous. Turns out that they are both words. They mean the exact same thing. Odoriferous is the variant spelling of odoriferous.
We were both correct.
My apologies to you.
Well, and I accept that. It takes a big man to accept an apology, and I'm a big man.
Now, all 5'8" of apologizing to all 6'7".
And it's one more quirk of the English language that there are two words that are very close in spelling that mean the exact same darn thing. It makes no sense.
I'll use mine in a sentence. Co-hosting with Bill Stubblefield and John Bodwell in a warm studio with the doors closed can be a very odoriferous experience.
Very nice, very nice. Not for us, but
I'm taking it personal, John.
Yeah, I am too now. Oh, hey, good English. Yeah, bad sentiment.
Mr. Ferretti, good morning to you.
Good morning. You know, the value of the show is apparent every day.
If you're looking to take an SAT test, you might want to listen once in a while.
That is an SAT term too, no doubt.
All right, just once in a while, just tune in is all I'm saying. Get what you need. Jack that score up about 10 points. Get into the school you always wanted to get into.
And leave.
Get out, close the door behind you.
And find some more NIL money and go somewhere else.
Boy, the money, I'll tell you what. College football will eventually become a developmental minor league for the NFL.
And it showed last night.
That was a heck of a game last night, wasn't it?
It was a heck of a game.
I went to bed at halftime.
But the talent at Ohio State especially was just out of the roof.
It's a
pro team.
They had the best playoff run. They earned that national championship. They were the best team.
Notre Dame will catch up because Notre Dame is independent. So the $20 million Ohio State got, they got to split with the whole conference. Notre Dame gets their $20 million. They start spending more on NIL, who knows?
It's a tremendous amount of money that floats around, 6 figures, 7 figures for these kids.
And Notre Dame has the alumni base. They could have a huge NIL pool if they chose to.
Joe, let's talk some legal issues here, and I want to begin first with the 91st Delegate District seat. Joe DeSoto, as we know, switched to Democrat just before he was voted out of the House of Delegates. The Republicans think they should get that seat. The Democrats say, hey, read the law. There's no choice but to give it to a Democrat. That's what the law states. As an attorney reading these laws, what do you think?
Well, I think the Democrats have a pretty strong argument as I read the law. And just to recap where we are, Rob, a writ of mandamus is currently pending before the West Virginia Supreme Court. It's a writ of mandamus is a fancy word for compelling the court to issue an order whereby certain government officials, agencies are directed to do something by the courts. And in this case, the Democratic Party in West Virginia is asking the Supreme Court to direct the governor and the legislature to follow the law and allow the Democratic Party to submit their list of 3 candidates who will fill the vacancy caused by the situation with Joseph DeSoto. And what it boils down to is this, Rob, as I read the law. There are 2 statutes in play here. And the one that's most troublesome, I think, for the Republicans, and let me start by saying, look, I think we can agree if fairness dictated a result here, a Republican would be filling the seat. Mm-hmm. So that we can all agree on that. But the law clearly states that the term of the legislature begins December 1. Now, I know the Republicans are arguing, well, he never took the oath of office, so he was never officially a member of the legislature. Well, they got the problem with the statute, which decrees that the legislature is essentially set after elections are certified by the counties, and we have a winner. And in that case, that was Joe DeSoto. So on December 1, according to the law, he is a member of the legislature. Now, what the legislature should have done, given some of the alleged misconduct of Joe DeSoto, was move to expel him as a member. But they knew if they did that, they would be conceding that he was a member of the legislature, and then the statute, which governs how to replace a sitting legislator, the statute that says, the party that was currently that legislature was a member of, that's the party that gets to fill the seat. the legislature had to know that if they expelled him, they would be admitting he was a member. So they went about this with this House resolution to declare the seat vacant and hoping that the Republican Party would be the one that gets to fill the seat because they would claim that Joe DeSoto was never a member of the legislature. So the petition, the writ for mandamus, basically says, look, they didn't follow the rules. They should have moved to expel him because he was already a member as of December 1. So this resolution is void, and the Supreme Court has to order the legislature and the governor to follow the laws as written. I think it's the stronger side of the argument. Now, I'm done predicting what courts do in the face of the written word, but as I look at this, I think the Democrats have a stronger argument.
In the discussions we've had leading up to this one here, Joe, I would agree with you. It seems if you follow the law on this one, the law favors the Democrats in this case. Although common sense dictates they shouldn't get the seat because they didn't even bother to put up a candidate in that district. So it would really violate common sense if the Democrat gets the seat here, even though it follows the law.
Well, and it's really gonna tip the scales of the House toward the Democratic Party.
90-10 versus 91-9.
What is it? Yeah, I mean it's.
Jonathan, I agree with that. I mean, in the scheme of things, it's not a huge deal, but there's some parliamentary procedure that, and I'm at a loss to explain it to you, but because I don't understand it myself. But there's something about a 90-10 split in the legislature that has some implications for how it operates.
I think it can force. I think they said it forces the roll call votes.
It does, yes, exactly.
If you have 10%.
Okay. Visibility.
Okay.
The visibility.
Yeah,
yeah I mean, I think
there's a small implication there.
I mein, it should. I mean, they didn't put up a candidate. I mean, it should be a Republican seat without a doubt. They're going to have to. They're going to have to go in and change the law.
They had the opportunity to do that earlier and had the opportunity to do it last year, and they chose not to pick it up. Joe, to me, an equally important question is, what will Governor Morrissey do? Will he take action and appoint someone before the Supreme Court's had an opportunity to make their decision, or will he wait till after the Supreme Court?
I would be disappointed, Bill, if he went forward and picked someone that the Republican County Executive Committee had put up because he knows it's pending before the West Virginia Supreme Court. He is a party to the lawsuit. He was named, which the Democrats had to do because the governor is instrumental in following the law. He's the one directed under the statute to take certain actions. So I would be disappointed if he just went forward and made an appointment already. The legislature is not in session. The Supreme Court has clearly indicated with the issuance of a scheduling order just a day or two ago that they're going to move with due speed on dealing with this issue. So I think the governor would be well advised just to sit back and let the process work.
We know who the Democratic appointees, at least candidates are. Do we know yet who the Republican candidates are?
They do. We don't.
They have not been published.
We have insinuated some names. Tammy Hess, who finished second in that race, and also I think his name is Ian Masters. We've had him on the show a couple of times from the West Virginia Citizens Defense League.
And also Don Forsch has applied for the job.
We have heard that Don has applied, but none of those names have been officially confirmed as being on the list of three.
Yeah.
So, Joe, let's talk executive orders. Right?
Oh, boy.
President Trump issued a bunch of those yesterday. And among the ones that I asked you to take a look at, including Executive Order 13989. This is an order that involves ethics and potential relaxation of some of those ethical standards that are in place. Can you tell us about this one?
Yeah, one of the things that President Trump did yesterday, and I think Marshall Wilson talked a little bit about this, is he went forward and basically rescinded a bunch of executive orders that were signed by President Biden. One of them was, as you said, Executive Order number 13989. Upon entering the office in January of 2021, President Biden passed what is really an ethics rule, and it required anybody coming into a cabinet position or a governmental agency to sign a pledge acknowledging that there were certain constraints on them in terms of any opportunities they would have to profit from their position in government. And as one might imagine, there were bans on accepting gifts from lobbyists, and there were bans on returning to the private sector and immediately taking a job with a business or corporation that that person was a part of regulating during his or her employment with government. And most importantly, it restricted current government employees from regulating a business or industry that they previously worked in for a period of 2 years. So if you can imagine somebody who perhaps was a government contractor, so somebody worked with Halliburton, which is a big defense contractor. If they came in and suddenly started being involved in the regulation of these certain contractors, well, the familiarity with their former employer could be a problem, or at least give the appearance of impropriety in terms of regulations and how the government deals with some of those businesses. So this ethics pledge required these kinds of folks to steer clear of having to regulate previous employers. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it. That was rescinded by President Trump yesterday. Now, he may have rescinded it because they have a better way or approach to dealing with this problem, or he may feel that constraints are not necessary under these circumstances. We don't know yet. But that was one of the former president's executive orders that was rescinded.
Yeah, hopefully there's more information to come out on this one, but on the surface, it doesn't seem like a good idea.
No, look, there's a lot of dirty little secrets in Washington and K Street and with the lobbyists and really a lot of problems with these people who go back and forth between private industry and the government in a regulatory scheme. And it's been a problem for a long time. This was an effort by the Biden administration to try to clean that up a little bit, put some constraints on these folks. I would hope that going forward, the Trump administration will take a fresh look at this, and maybe they have a different or better way to deal with it, and we'll have to wait and see.
Birthright citizenship, Joe. This one I think is going to be a bit more complicated than just an executive order to rescind it, correct?
Yeah, no question. Birthright citizenship is embodied in the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. It was in response to the probably one of the biggest stains on the U.S. Supreme Court, the Dred Scott decision, where a slave was brought into the free states by the slave owner. Then the slave owner was going to bring the slave back to a slave state. That slave was Dred Scott. He sued, claiming that he was on free soil and should be considered a freeman. And, of course, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that Africans who had been brought into this country or actually born in this country to other slaves, they don't have citizenship rights. And so Dred Scott had to go back to the slave state and continue in enslavement. And in response to that, the 14th Amendment was passed out of concern that we were potentially creating a whole group of non-citizens in this country forever, in perpetuity. And the 14th Amendment was designed to deal with that, and it basically declared that anybody born on this soil is a U.S. citizen. And the U.S. Supreme Court has interpreted the 14th Amendment to state exactly that ever since. Now, despite 100 and somewhat years of precedent, President Trump issues an executive order basically declaring that the U.S. government is no longer going to recognize birthright citizenship. And that is immediately, I think lawsuits have already been filed. It's immediately going to the courts. And if the U.S. Supreme Court is consistent with its own precedent and the intent and purpose of the 14th Amendment, this executive order will be stricken.
So do you think that was just him, posturing, wanting to throw something else out there to get big headlines when his people had already told him, hey, this isn't going to fly, but you can go ahead and do it?
Oh, I think there are certain people in his administration, and there's certain right-wing think tanks who believe that the interpretation of the 14th Amendment is such that it does not grant birthright citizenship under all circumstances. And it's been as far as I can tell, it's been a debate academically going back now decades. This is just a culmination of that. And it fits, with his hard line on immigration and immigration status. So it's consistent. And I just think he happens to be the guy in the office now who decides that he's going to test this legally. Again, if the Supreme Court follows its precedent, this is going to be a loss for the Trump administration. But again, I'm not going to be predicting what this U.S. Supreme Court is going to do.
I was just about to ask if you would handicap it. Thank you for.
Yeah, but I would say it should be 90% to 10% that this birthright citizenship will be upheld. But given the historical precedent behind the 14th Amendment, we know what the intent was here. It's clear. But things change, and the composition of the court has clearly changed, and so I give it a 10% chance.
Yeah, Joe, I was going to pick up on that, the composition of the court. I think previous courts, historical precedent, had more weight than it evidently does with this court. There's been 2 or 3 examples, and you can cite them better than I can, of historical precedent being ignored. So that, to me, gives this particular executive orders some validity.
Well, look, and the academic debate, and I'm sorry for the pejoratives here, but the discussion about anchor babies and things of that nature, that does concern folks. That the clear intent of some people in crossing the border is to have children in this country and then have an argument that they get to remain because their child's a U.S. citizen. And so academically, that's front and center on this discussion. But I think the law is pretty clear here if we interpret it the way it was intended and the way it's written. And if that means anything at all to this U.S. Supreme Court, that's why I think it's 90 to 10.
Joe, the conditions you just brought up as you couched that, I want to go further with that too. So when we go back to Dred Scott, we're clearly talking about people who are brought here against their will, had no control over it. When we talk about the way that this case is going to be presented, it's people that are breaking into the country illegally, and then having a child, as I'm sure the argument is going to be for the explicit and sole purpose of that child being an American citizen. So you're rewarding a bad behavior with a good result, is I'm sure what the argument's going to be here. Are the two not completely opposite arguments as to the enforcement of this law?
Oh, no question. Academically, if you look at the situations, yeah, you can make those distinctions, and you can. That's really the heart of the argument for those who want to do away with birthright citizenship. But I just want to correct a couple things. Number one, President Trump said that we're the only country that has birthright citizenship. That is plainly wrong. There are plenty of countries across the globe who also have that law in their constitution or in their public policy. Secondly, there's the situation where there are people who have that intent to cross the border and have a child. But there's plenty of other people who are across the border and they're in the process of becoming U.S. citizens, and life goes on and they have a child. And there's a lot of distinctions there. And at some point, it gets almost impossible to have all those various distinctions dealt with by law. And so that's why you kind of err on one side or the other in terms of how you look at this argument. But it's been the precedent in this country for 140 years or more. Basically, if you're born in this country, you're a U.S. citizen.
I've got about a minute and a half left. Joe, do you want to tackle January 6 pardons?
No. I really don't. Look, I'll just say this in a minute and a half. Yesterday, and I I'm going to hold both administrations accountable for this. Was an extremely sad day for this country in terms of this pardon power. I know, again, that's embodied in the Constitution, and so it's very difficult to grapple with. But we have reached the point, I think we can all agree, we've reached the point where that power is being abused. It has become a political football, and it makes our country look like it's just out of control, weak, and not serious in terms of enforcing the rule of law, accountability, holding people responsible for their actions. And I think preemptive pardons were never contemplated under the law, but here we are. And I think coming in on your first day of office and pardoning a bunch of people who trashed the Capitol, I understand there were some people who just walked in and were guilty of nothing but a misdemeanor trespass, but there were plenty of people who took it upon themselves to really be violent and to harm others and to harm the country, and they should be held accountable too. And so, just a sad day yesterday all around. I hold it both sides of the political spectrum responsible for this kind of back and forth gotcha type situation. And
thank you, Joe. I just ran out of time. I got to get to my final break.